Don't you dare touch my car with those filthy hands. The shriek echoed across the luxury parking garage like a banshee's wail, causing heads to turn and phones to emerge from pockets. Madeline Chase stood frozen in horror, her perfectly manicured hand pressed against her chest as if she'd witnessed a murder rather than a man with a spray bottle cleaning bird droppings from her windshield. The janitor, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s wearing a simple gray uniform, paused mid-wipe and turned slowly. His movements held an odd grace, like a dancer pretending to be a construction worker. I was just what? Destroying a $60,000 paint job. Madeline's voice climbed higher with each word, her face flushing red beneath her expertly applied makeup. Do you have any idea what you've done? That's genuine Italian leather seats in there. The smell of whatever cheap cleaner you're using will probably take weeks to get out. The man's eyes, startlingly intelligent and calm, met hers without flinching. I apologize if I've upset you. I was only trying to help. Bird droppings can damage the clear coat if left too long. Help! Madeline laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You think I need help from someone like you? She gestured wildly at his uniform, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the fluorescent lights. I have people for this. Professional people. Not some. She paused, her gaze sweeping over him with undisguised disgust. Not some minimum wage nobody who doesn't know his place. A small crowd had begun to gather, smartphones held discreetly at waist level. The parking garage security cameras hummed quietly overhead, their red recording lights blinking like mechanical heartbeats. The janitor folded his cleaning cloth with deliberate precision, his weathered hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd performed countless repetitive tasks. But something about the way he carried himself seemed off, his posture too straight, his gaze too direct, his voice carrying an undertone of education that didn't match his uniform. I understand your concern about your vehicle, he said quietly, his tone maddeningly reasonable. Perhaps I should have asked permission first. Perhaps. Madeline's voice reached a pitch that made nearby car alarms seem melodic. Perhaps you should learn to recognize when you're in the presence of your betters. This isn't some public parking lot where any common laborer can just pour at people's property. The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the first crack in his composed facade. I see. Do you really? Madeline stepped closer, her designer heels clicking against the polished concrete like a countdown timer. Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone who's never owned anything nicer than a bicycle. You have no concept of what it means to work for something, to build something, to. She stopped abruptly, her tirade cut short by the sight of something that didn't belong. Beneath the man's open collar, partially hidden by his uniform shirt, was the unmistakable glint of an expensive watch. Not expensive in the way her husband's Rolex was expensive. This was something else entirely. Subtle. Understated. The kind of timepiece that whispered rather than shouted its worth. Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from. Some stories are too close to my heart to share on YouTube. I send those, along with little life lessons and surprises, to my email circle. If you'd like to be part of it, you can join with the link in the description. The janitor noticed her gaze and casually adjusted his shirt, covering the watch. But not before Madeline caught sight of something else, a thin gold chain around his neck, expensive and elegant, completely at odds with his humble uniform. You know what your problem is. Madeline continued, but her voice had lost some of its earlier venom. You people think you can just insert yourselves into spaces where you don't belong. This parking garage is for premium shoppers only. There are rules. Standards. Standards, the man repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Yes, I suppose there are. A security guard approached, a young woman with kind eyes and a nervous expression. Excuse me, is there a problem here? Madeline whirled around, grateful for an audience. This man was putting his hands all over my car without permission. I want him fired. Immediately. The security guard glanced at the janitor, and something passed between them, a look of recognition that lasted barely a second. I'll see what I can do. See what you can do. Madeline's voice cracked like a whip. What's to see? He's a janitor. Fire him. Get him out of here. Make sure he never sets foot in this mall again. The janitor began packing his cleaning supplies into a small cart, his movements unhurried despite the growing crowd of onlookers. Several people were now openly recording, their phones held high to capture every moment of Madeline's performance. The security guard said carefully, Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private. Private? Why would we need privacy? I have nothing to hide. Unlike some people. Madeline's gaze swept over the janitor with renewed contempt. Look at him. Skulking around, pretending to work, when what he's really doing is casing the place. Probably figuring out which cars to break into later. The crowd murmured, some in agreement, others in discomfort. The janitor continued his methodical cleaning of supplies, seemingly unbothered by the accusations flying around him. I should call the police, Madeline announced loudly. Have them run a background check. I bet you'll find he's got a record. They always do. The janitor straightened slowly, fixing Madeline with a look that made her take an involuntary step backward. For a moment, his carefully constructed humble demeanor slipped, revealing something harder underneath, something that spoke of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions rather than mop buckets and floor wax. That's an interesting suggestion, he said quietly. By all means, call whoever you feel you need to call. He reached into his pocket, and Madeline tensed as if expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a simple cloth cap and placed it carefully on his head, adjusting it with the same meticulous attention he'd given to folding his cleaning cloth. But as he did, the overhead lights caught something else, a small, almost invisible logo embroidered on the side of his uniform shirt. A logo that Madeline, despite her self-absorption, recognized immediately. Because it was the same logo that appeared on every lease agreement in the mall. The same logo that appeared on the deed to her apartment building. The same logo that had been quietly buying up half the city's prime real estate for the past decade. The logo of Brooks Enterprises. And suddenly, impossibly, the janitor's calm demeanor made perfect sense. Madeline's breath caught in her throat, but she quickly dismissed the recognition as coincidence. Plenty of companies used similar-looking logos. Besides, what would a Brooks Enterprises executive be doing mopping floors in a shopping mall? The very idea was absurd. The janitor, Leon, though she didn't know his name yet, began wheeling his cart toward the elevator, but paused when the security guard cleared her throat. Sir, the guard said, her voice carefully neutral. Mrs. Chase would like to file a formal complaint. Would she now? Leon's tone carried the faintest hint of amusement. And what exactly would this complaint entail? Madeline straightened, her confidence returning. Destruction of private property. Harassment. Trespassing. She counted off on her fingers like a prosecuting attorney. And I want him banned from this entire shopping center. Permanently. Leon nodded thoughtfully, as if seriously considering her demands. That seems thorough. What Madeline didn't know was that 3 hours earlier, Leon Brooks had been sitting in the executive conference room of his downtown headquarters, reviewing the quarterly reports that had made him one of the wealthiest men in the state. What she also didn't know was that he'd specifically chosen this mall for his monthly reality check, an undercover inspection he'd been conducting for the past year to see how ordinary workers were treated by customers. The idea had come to him during a particularly brutal board meeting where his executives had proposed cutting benefits for janitorial staff across all their properties. They're invisible anyway, one vice president had said. No one even notices they exist. Leon had decided to find out exactly how invisible they really were. The security guard, Victoria Reeves, a single mother working 2 jobs to put herself through law school, shifted uncomfortably. She'd recognized Leon the moment he'd walked in that morning, having seen his photo in the employee newsletter when Brooks Enterprises had acquired the mall 6 months ago. But his request for absolute secrecy had been explicit. Treat him like any other janitor, no matter what happened. Perhaps, Victoria suggested carefully, we could review the security footage to see exactly what occurred. Madeline's eyes lit up. Excellent idea. You'll see him deliberately targeting my car. Probably planning to scratch it or steal something from inside. Leon continued packing his supplies with methodical precision, but internally, he was conducting a different kind of inventory. In the past hour, he'd watched Madeline berate a teenage cashier for taking too long with her change, snap at an elderly greeter for not moving fast enough, and now attack him for trying to clean her windshield. Each interaction revealed layers of entitlement that ran deeper than mere rudeness. They spoke to a fundamental belief that other people existed solely for her convenience. What Leon didn't yet understand was the source of Madeline's venom. Madeline Chase hadn't always been wealthy. Born Madeline Fletcher in a trailer park outside the city, she'd clawed her way up through a combination of strategic marriage, ruthless social climbing, and the kind of desperate hunger that comes from knowing what it feels like to have nothing. Her first husband had been a middle manager at an insurance company, comfortable, but not rich. Her second husband, Richard Chase, was old money, golf club money, inherited wealth that came with a pedigree and expectations. The problem was that Richard's family had never fully accepted her. They tolerated her presence at charity galas and country club dinners, but she could feel their disdain like cold wind through expensive fabric. To them, she would always be the girl from the wrong side of town who'd married above her station. So Madeline had learned to project that same disdain downward, onto people she perceived as beneath her. Service workers, retail employees, anyone who reminded her of where she'd come from became targets for the rage she couldn't direct at her in-laws. It was a psychological defense mechanism. If she could convince herself that she was fundamentally different from those people, then maybe she really belonged in the rarefied world she'd fought so hard to enter. Leon, of course, knew none of this. What he saw was a woman who seemed to take genuine pleasure in humiliating others, and it stirred something dark in his chest, a memory of his own mother, who'd cleaned office buildings for 30 years and come home with stories of executives who treated her like furniture. "You know what I think?" Madeline announced, her voice carrying across the parking garage. "I think this whole thing was deliberate. I think he saw my car, a Maserati, in case you're wondering, and decided to mess with it out of jealousy." A murmur went through the crowd of onlookers. Several people nodded in agreement, while others looked uncomfortable with the direction the confrontation was taking. Leon's hands stilled on his cleaning cart. "Jealousy? Oh, please. Don't act innocent." Madeline's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "You probably make, what, $8 an hour? 9. You see a car worth more than you'll make in 5 years, and you just can't help yourself. You have to touch it, damage it, bring it down to your level." Leon turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made Victoria take a half step forward, as if to intervene. But he simply said, "That's an interesting theory." "It's not a theory. It's human nature. People like you always resent people like me. You can't stand that we've worked hard and earned what we have, while you're stuck pushing a mop bucket around." The irony was so thick that several onlookers exchanged glances. They were witnessing a woman who'd inherited her wealth through marriage lecture a man about hard work, a man who, unknown to them, had built his fortune from a single construction company inherited from his father into a multi-billion-dollar empire. Leon's phone buzzed, a text from his assistant reminding him about the charity board meeting scheduled for that afternoon. The meeting where they would decide which local organizations would receive grants from the Brooks Foundation's annual giving program. The same meeting where they would review applications from the women's shelter where Victoria volunteered, the food bank that served Madeline's old neighborhood, and the scholarship fund for disadvantaged students. Applications that could change hundreds of lives with a single signature. Applications that Leon would review with fresh perspective after today's encounter. Victoria said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Perhaps you'd like to step into the security office where we can discuss this privately." Madeline waved her off. "I'm not the one who needs to explain herself. He is." She pointed at Leon like a prosecutor indicating a defendant. "I want to know what his real intentions were. I want to know why he targeted my car specifically. And I want to know what he was planning to steal." Leon straightened slowly, his full height impressive even in the humble janitor's uniform. For just a moment, his carefully constructed persona slipped, and the crowd caught a glimpse of the man who commanded billion-dollar board meetings and negotiated with city councils. "You want to know my intentions?" he asked quietly. "Yes, I do." Leon glanced around the circle of faces, some hostile, some curious, some openly recording everything. His gaze lingered on Victoria, who gave him an almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Don't do it," her expression pleaded. "Don't reveal yourself yet." But Leon had heard enough. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, not the cheap vinyl one a minimum wage worker might carry, but a sleek leather billfold that whispered rather than shouted its expense. From it, he extracted a business card and held it out toward Madeline. "My intentions," he said calmly, "were exactly what I said they were. I was cleaning your windshield because bird droppings can damage automotive paint. Nothing more, nothing less." Madeline snatched the card without looking at it. "Oh, how convenient. The janitor just happens to have business cards. What's next? A LinkedIn profile." The crowd chuckled, but the laughter died as Madeline finally glanced down at the card in her hand. The color drained from her face as if someone had pulled a plug. Because printed in elegant silver lettering on cream-colored cardstock were 3 words that changed everything. Leon Brooks, Chief Executive Officer, Brooks Enterprises. And suddenly, The real betrayal wasn't that a janitor had touched her car. The real betrayal was that she'd just spent the last 20 minutes publicly humiliating the most powerful man in the city. The business card fluttered from Madeline's trembling fingers like a dying butterfly, landing face up on the polished concrete floor. The silver lettering seemed to glow under the harsh fluorescent lights, each word a small explosion in the sudden silence. Leon Brooks watched her face cycle through disbelief, recognition, and something approaching panic. The crowd of onlookers pressed closer, phones held high, sensing that they were witnessing something extraordinary, the kind of viral moment that would be dissected frame by frame across social media platforms. That's not possible, Madeline whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the parking garage's ventilation system. Leon straightened, and suddenly the janitor's uniform seemed like a costume that no longer fit properly. His posture shifted, shoulders squaring, chin lifting, and the assembled crowd found themselves looking at a completely different man. The transformation was so complete that several people actually took a step backward. "Mrs. Chase," Leon said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "I believe you wanted to file a complaint." The crowd buzzed with whispered recognition. Someone in the back called out, "Holy shit, that's really him." Another voice added, "My dad works construction for Brooks Enterprises." Phones were raised higher, angles adjusted, live streams started. Madeline's mind raced as the implications crashed over her like successive waves. Brooks Enterprises owned this mall. They owned the apartment building where her personal trainer lived. They owned the office complex where Richard conducted his financial planning business. They sponsored the charity gala where she served on the planning committee. They were everywhere in her life, pulling strings she'd never even noticed. And she'd just spent 20 minutes publicly destroying the reputation of their CEO. I didn't know," she stammered, bending to retrieve the business card with shaking hands. "You were dressed like... how was I supposed to?" "Supposed to what?" Leon asked calmly. "Treat me with basic human decency." Victoria stepped forward, her security guard training warring with her desire to protect Leon's cover. "Sir, perhaps we should move this to..." "No." Leon's voice cut through her suggestion like a blade. Mrs. Chase wanted a public forum for her complaint. Let's give her exactly what she asked for. The crowd was growing larger by the minute. Word was spreading through the mall via text messages and social media posts. Shoppers were abandoning their purchases to crowd around the parking garage entrance. The #JanitorCEO was already trending on 3 platforms. Madeline's phone buzzed, a text from her husband Richard. "Honey, you need to see what's happening on Twitter. Someone's posting videos of you at the mall. What's going on?" Her stomach dropped. Richard's financial planning firm depended heavily on referrals from the city's elite social circles. If this scandal damaged their reputation... "Mr. Brooks," she said, forcing her voice to steady, "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "Has there?" Leon tilted his head, genuinely curious. "Because from where I stand, you've been quite clear about your position. You believe that people in service positions are beneath your notice. You think that anyone who works with their hands is planning to steal from you. You've suggested that I should be fired, banned from the premises, and investigated by police." Each word hit Madeline like a physical blow. Behind Leon, Victoria was discreetly speaking into her radio, probably calling for backup as the crowd continued to swell. The security cameras overhead tracked the scene with mechanical precision, recording everything for posterity. "Those weren't my real feelings," Madeline said desperately. I was having a bad day. My charity committee meeting ran long, and I was stressed about..." "Your charity committee?" Leon's eyebrows rose. "Which charity would that be?" The Children's Hospital Foundation," Madeline said, grasping at respectability. "We're planning the annual gala. I've put months of work into..." "Interesting," Leon interrupted. "Because Brooks Enterprises is the primary corporate sponsor of that gala. In fact, I believe we've committed to a 7-figure donation this year." The blood drained from Madeline's face. The gala was her pet project, the social event that had finally earned her genuine respect from Richard's family. She'd spent 8 months organizing every detail, calling in favors, building her reputation as someone who could deliver results. The success of the gala was supposed to be her triumph, proof that she belonged in their world. If Brooks Enterprises pulled their sponsorship... "Mr. Brooks," she said, her voice cracking, "surely we can work this out like civilized people. I made a mistake. I'm willing to apologize." "Are you?" Leon's voice remained maddeningly calm. Because 5 minutes ago, you were demanding that I be fired and banned from the premises. You suggested that I was a criminal planning to steal from you. You called me a minimum wage nobody who didn't know his place. The crowd murmured approval. Several people were recording Leon's measured response, clearly impressed by his restraint in the face of Madeline's earlier assault. Victoria's radio crackled. "We've got news vans pulling into the parking lot," her colleague reported. "Channel 7 and Fox are already setting up." Leon heard the report and something shifted in his expression. Not anger, but a cold calculation that was somehow more frightening. "Mrs. Chase, you wanted this to be public. You insisted on making a scene, drawing a crowd, recording everything. So let's see this through to its logical conclusion." "What do you mean?" Madeline asked, though she dreaded the answer. Leon pulled out his phone, not the cheap burner a janitor might carry, but a top-of-the-line device that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. He speed-dialed a number and held the phone to his ear. "Jennifer, it's Leon. I need you to pull the file on the Children's Hospital Foundation gala. Yes, the one next month. I want you to review our sponsorship commitment. No, don't cancel it yet, but prepare the paperwork just in case." Madeline felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "No, please, you can't." Leon held up a finger, continuing his call. "Also, I want you to look into all of our other charitable commitments. Any organization that has Mrs. Madeline Chase on their board or planning committee. Chase, CHSE. Yes, I'll hold." The crowd watched in fascination as the most powerful man in the city calmly dismantled Madeline's social standing with a single phone call. This wasn't just about embarrassment anymore. This was about her entire life's work, every connection she'd carefully cultivated, every bridge she'd painstakingly built. Her phone rang. "Richard. Madeline, what the hell is happening? I've got 3 clients calling me about videos of you screaming at someone in a parking garage. And now I'm hearing it's Leon Brooks? Please tell me this is some kind of joke." She let the call go to voicemail, unable to form words. Leon finished his call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Mrs. Chase, you asked me earlier if I knew my place. I think it's time you learned yours." He began walking toward the elevator, pushing his cleaning cart with the same methodical precision he'd shown throughout the encounter. But now it seemed less like humility and more like a power play. The richest man in the city literally pushing a mop bucket while destroying someone's life with quiet efficiency. "Wait!" Madeline called after him, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "We can work this out. I'll do anything, a public apology, a donation to charity, whatever you want." Leon paused at the elevator doors, his finger hovering over the call button. When he turned back, his expression was almost sad. "Mrs. Chase, 30 minutes ago, all I wanted was to clean bird droppings off your windshield. You turned that simple act of service into a public humiliation. You made assumptions about my character, my motivations, and my worth as a human being based solely on my appearance and occupation." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. "The question now," Leon continued, stepping into the elevator with his cart, "is what kind of person that makes you. And more importantly, what kind of person you want to become." As the doors began to close, he added, "The charity gala is in 3 weeks. I suggest you use that time to figure out whether you're truly sorry for your actions, or just sorry you got caught." The elevator doors sealed shut with mechanical finality, leaving Madeline alone in the parking garage with a crowd of strangers, a dozen rolling cameras, and the crushing realization that her carefully constructed life was about to come apart at the seams. Her phone buzzed with another text from Richard. "Coming to get you now. Don't say anything else to anyone. We need damage control. Fast." But as Madeline looked around at the sea of phones recording her every expression, she realized that some damage couldn't be controlled. Some damage was permanent. And the worst part was knowing that she'd done it all to herself. The elevator carried Leon to the executive offices on the mall's top floor, a space most shoppers didn't even know existed. Behind frosted glass doors marked administration, he found his regional manager, Thomas Hartwell, frantically fielding phone calls while 3 monitors displayed social media feeds that refreshed every few seconds with new posts about the parking garage incident. "Sir," Thomas said, covering his phone's mouthpiece, "I've got Channel 7, the Tribune, and something called Millionaire Meltdowns all requesting interviews. The hashtag #JanitorCEO is trending nationally now." Leon set down his cleaning cart and began unbuttoning his gray uniform shirt, revealing the expensive white dress shirt underneath. "What's our legal exposure?" Minimal, from what I can tell. She initiated the confrontation. It was in a public space, and multiple witnesses confirm you were simply cleaning her windshield. Thomas handed him a tablet. But sir, there's something else you need to see. The tablet displayed Madeline's Instagram profile, a carefully curated collection of charity galas, luxury vacations, and designer outfits. But what caught Leon's attention was a post from 2 hours earlier, a photo of herself at the children's hospital, surrounded by young patients, with the caption, "So grateful to spend time with these little heroes today. Can't wait for our gala next month to raise funds for their care. #children's first #charity work." Leon's jaw tightened. The timestamp showed she'd been at the hospital just before coming to the mall. She'd literally gone from visiting sick children to screaming at a janitor for trying to help her. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Madeline sat in her Maserati with the engine running, frantically making phone calls while news vans circled the parking garage like sharks. Her first call was to her friend Cassandra Powell, who served on the hospital board. "Cass, thank God you answered. Have you seen the videos?" "Videos? What videos? I'm in back-to-back meetings all day." Madeline's heart leaped with hope. If the board members hadn't seen the footage yet, maybe she could control the narrative. There was an incident at the mall. Someone took something completely out of context and... "Hold on, I'm getting a call from Jonathan Wheeler. He's the board chairman. Can I call you back?" The line went dead, and Madeline felt her stomach drop. Jonathan Wheeler was old money, old values, and absolutely unforgiving when it came to public scandals that might reflect poorly on the hospital's reputation. Her phone immediately rang again. "Richard, don't come home yet," he said without preamble. "There are reporters camped outside our building. And Madeline, I just got off the phone with my partners. They are concerned about how this might affect client confidence." Richard's financial firm catered to the same social circle where Madeline had built her reputation. If wealthy clients started questioning the character of their advisor's wife. "It's going to be fine," Madeline said, though her voice lacked conviction. "I'll fix this. I just need to talk to Leon Brooks directly, explain that it was all a misunderstanding." "Leon Brooks? Madeline, you don't just talk to Leon Brooks. He's not exactly available for coffee dates. The man owns half the city." What Richard didn't know, what Madeline was only beginning to understand, was that Leon Brooks wasn't just wealthy. He was strategically wealthy. Every property acquisition, every business partnership, every charitable donation was calculated to build a web of influence that touched every aspect of the city's power structure. Back in the administrative offices, Leon was discovering just how far that web extended. His assistant Jennifer had compiled a list of Madeline's connections, and the scope was impressive. Board positions on 3 major charities, membership in the city's most exclusive country club, and volunteer work with organizations that received significant Brooks Enterprises funding. "She's not just some random socialite," Jennifer reported via video call from headquarters. "She's positioned herself at the center of the charitable giving community. If we blacklist her, it sends a message to everyone in her circle." Leon studied the reports while changing back into his business attire. "What kind of message?" "That you don't forgive mistakes. That one bad day can destroy someone's life's work." Jennifer paused. "Sir, I've worked for you for 8 years. I've seen you give second chances to employees who've made much bigger errors than this." It was a fair point, and Leon knew it. He built his reputation on being tough but fair, demanding but supportive. The company culture at Brooks Enterprises emphasized growth through failure, learning through mistakes. But this felt different. This wasn't a business error or a moment of poor judgment. This was a glimpse into someone's core character, a window into how they viewed other human beings when they thought no one important was watching. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, the security guard. "Sir, Mrs. Chase is still in the parking garage. She's been making calls for 30 minutes. The news crews are getting restless, and some of the other customers are complaining about the crowd." Leon walked to the window overlooking the parking garage. From this height, Madeline looked small and vulnerable, surrounded by the chaos she'd created. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled now, her designer outfit wrinkled from stress. She was pacing beside her car, gesturing frantically as she spoke into her phone. For a moment, Leon felt something he hadn't expected, sympathy. Then his phone rang. The caller ID showed the name of his mother's former supervisor from the cleaning company where she'd worked for 3 decades. "Mr. Brooks? This is Janet Morrison from Citywide Cleaning Services. I hope you don't mind me calling directly." Leon had donated significantly to the company's employee assistance fund over the years, in honor of his mother's memory. Not at all, Janet. What can I do for you? Well, sir, I've been seeing these videos online, and I wanted you to know what that woman said to you today. That's what your mother faced every single day for 30 years. The name calling, the assumptions, the way people looked right through her like she wasn't even human. Leon's grip tightened on the phone. I remember. She used to come home crying sometimes. Not because the work was hard, your Mima never minded hard work, but because of how people treated her. Like she was invisible. Like she didn't matter. The conversation ended, but its impact lingered. Leon found himself thinking about his mother's calloused hands, her perpetually sore back, her quiet dignity in the face of daily humiliation. She'd died before seeing him become successful, before knowing that her son would one day have the power to change how service workers were treated. Maybe this was his chance to honor her memory. Or maybe it was his chance to become the kind of person she'd taught him not to be. Downstairs, Madeline's situation was deteriorating rapidly. Her friend Cassandra had called back with devastating news. The hospital board was holding an emergency meeting to discuss her role in the gala planning committee. Jonathan Wheeler had seen the videos and was deeply concerned about the optics. Then Richard called with worse news. 3 of his biggest clients had already called to express their discomfort with the situation. One had suggested it might be time to re-evaluate their business relationship. We need a lawyer, Richard said. Someone who specializes in crisis management. I don't need a lawyer, Madeline protested. I need 5 minutes with Leon Brooks to explain myself. Madeline, listen to me carefully. This isn't about explanations anymore. This is about damage control. The videos have been viewed over 2 million times in the last hour. You're trending on Twitter. There are already memes. As if summoned by his words, Madeline's phone chimed with a notification. Someone had tagged her in a post titled "Karen Gets Owned by Billionaire CEO." The video had 50,000 likes and 10,000 shares. The comments were brutal. Imagine being this entitled. This is why rich people shouldn't exist. Plot twist, the janitor owns your house. Someone check on this woman's manager. She's about to ask for them. But buried among the mockery were other voices. People sharing their own stories of being mistreated by customers, of being ignored and dehumanized while trying to do their jobs. The incident had become a lightning rod for frustrations that went far beyond one woman's bad day. Victoria appeared at Madeline's car window, tapping gently. I need to ask you to move your vehicle. The news crews are blocking traffic. Madeline rolled down her window, and Victoria was struck by how different she looked. Gone was the imperious socialite from an hour ago. In her place was a frightened woman who seemed to be aging in real time. Did he really mean what he said about the charity sponsorship? Madeline asked quietly. Victoria glanced around to make sure no reporters were close enough to overhear. I can't speak for Mr. Brooks. But I can tell you that he's not the kind of man who makes threats lightly. I was just having a bad day, Madeline whispered. I didn't mean. I'm not usually like this. Maybe not, Victoria said gently. But the cameras don't know that. The internet doesn't know that. And right now, usually doesn't matter as much as actually. As Madeline drove away from the mall, she passed a billboard advertising the upcoming Children's Hospital Gala. Her own smiling face looked down from the advertisement, positioned next to the Brooks Enterprises logo and the words "Building Hope, Building Futures." She realized with growing horror that she might have just destroyed not only her own future, but the futures of countless children who needed the funds that gala would raise. And for the first time since the confrontation began, Madeline Chase started to understand that this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about what kind of world she wanted to live in, and what kind of person she wanted to be in it. But understanding the problem and solving it were 2 very different things. And time was running out. 6 hours after the parking garage incident, Leon Brooks sat in his corner office overlooking the city skyline, scrolling through the endless stream of videos, memes, and commentary that had turned a simple confrontation into a global phenomenon. His assistant Jennifer had compiled a media report that read like a cultural earthquake. #Janitor CEO was trending in 17 countries. The original video had been viewed 12 million times, and major news outlets were running think pieces about wealth inequality and service worker dignity. But none of that explained the growing unease in Leon's chest, or why Madeline Chase's face seemed hauntingly familiar in a way that had nothing to do with social media. His private line rang, the number only 3 people in the world possessed. Leon. The voice belonged to Father Miguel Santos, the elderly priest who had officiated at Leon's mother's funeral 15 years ago. "I've been watching the news. We need to talk. Father Miguel, if this is about the incident today, it's about Rosa Fletcher." Leon's blood turned to ice. Rosa Fletcher had been his mother's real name, before she married his father and became Rosa Brooks. Before she spent 30 years cleaning office buildings to support her family. Before she died of a heart attack brought on by decades of stress and overwork. "What about her?" Leon asked, though part of him already knew the answer would change everything. "The woman in the video, Leon. The one who spoke to you the way she did. I know her." The words hit Leon like physical blows. "That's impossible. Her name wasn't always Madeline Chase. It was Madeline Fletcher. Rosa's sister's daughter. Your cousin." The phone slipped from Leon's nerveless fingers, clattering onto his mahogany desk. Suddenly, the familiar features made perfect sense. The sharp cheekbones he'd inherited from his grandmother, the stubborn set of the jaw that ran in the Fletcher family, the expressive eyes that could flash from warmth to fury in an instant. Madeline Chase was family, and she had no idea who he was. Leon's mind raced backward through decades of carefully buried memories. Madeline Fletcher, his cousin who'd lived 3 trailers down in Sunset Gardens mobile home park. The girl who'd helped his mother with laundry when her arthritis got bad. The teenager who'd sworn she'd get out of the trailer park and never look back, no matter what it took. The girl who'd stopped visiting after she got her first scholarship to a better school across town. The young woman who'd changed her phone number when she married her first husband and moved to the wealthy side of the city. The relative who'd never called when his mother died. Leon retrieved his phone with shaking hands and speed-dialed his head of security. "I need you to run a deep background check on Madeline Fletcher Chase. Full history. Everything." "Sir, we already have basic." "Not basic. Everything. School records, employment history, family connections. I want to know what toothpaste she used in high school." While he waited for the report, Leon walked to his safe and withdrew a worn showbox that contained the only mementos he'd kept from his childhood. Buried beneath his mother's letters and old photographs was a Christmas card from 1992, signed in careful teenage handwriting. "Merry Christmas, Aunt Rosa and Leon. Love, Maddie." The same Maddie who'd just called him a minimum wage nobody in front of 12 million viewers. Meanwhile, across the city, Madeline was discovering that her nightmare was just beginning. She'd driven to her friend Cassandra's house, hoping for sanctuary, only to find that even her closest allies were backing away. "I'm sorry, Madeline," Cassandra said, not inviting her inside. "The board met this afternoon. They are removing you from the gala committee." "They can't do that. I've put 8 months of my life into this event." "They can, and they did." Jonathan Wheeler saw the videos. He said the hospital can't be associated with someone who treats service workers that way. Cassandra's voice was genuinely pained. "Madeline, I've known you for 5 years. I've never seen you act like that before. What happened?" What had happened was that Madeline had been caught being herself, the person she really was underneath the charity work and designer clothes. The frightened girl from the trailer park who'd learned that the only way to feel powerful was to make other people feel small. Her phone buzzed with a text from her husband Richard. "Don't come home tonight. The reporters haven't left. I've booked you a room at the Grandview under a false name. We'll figure this out tomorrow." Even Richard, the man who'd married her and given her entree into high society, was keeping his distance. But the worst blow came from an unexpected source. Her stepdaughter Emily, Richard's 19-year-old daughter from his first marriage, who'd always been coolly polite but never warm. "I saw the video," Emily texted. "I always wondered why our housekeeper quit so suddenly last year. Now I know. This is who you really are, isn't it?" Madeline stared at the message, remembering Carmen, the sweet older woman who'd cleaned their house for 2 years before abruptly giving notice. Madeline had assumed she'd found better pay elsewhere. Now she wondered what she'd said or done to drive Carmen away, and whether Emily had witnessed it. At the Grandview Hotel, Madeline checked in under the name Mary Fletcher, a cruel irony that reminded her of the girl she'd once been. The desk clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, didn't recognize her, and for a moment Madeline felt the relief of anonymity. But that relief evaporated when she turned on the television to find her own face staring back at her from every news channel. CNN was running a segment called Privilege and Power, When Wealth Meets Reality. Fox News had a panel discussing the death of common courtesy. Even comedy shows were already featuring her in their cold opens. Worse yet, investigative reporters had started digging into her background. Someone had found her high school yearbook photo, a thin, serious-faced girl with second-hand clothes and desperate eyes. The contrast with her current self was stark and unforgiving. From trailer park to country club, the rise and fall of Madeline Chase, read one headline. Poor girl made good, until she forgot where she came from, read another. Each article peeled back another layer of the careful facade she'd built over 2 decades. Her first marriage to an insurance salesman. Her second marriage to Richard, a man 15 years her senior with impressive family connections. Her methodical insertion into charity circles, country club memberships, and social registers. The picture that emerged was of a woman who'd systematically erased her past and constructed a new identity based on other people's money and status. A woman who'd forgotten that she'd once been exactly like the janitor she'd screamed at in the parking garage. Back in his office, Leon was reading the same articles with growing fascination and horror. The security report had filled in the gaps that the media missed. Madeline had legally changed her name from Fletcher to her first husband's surname, then taken Richard's name when she remarried. She'd given false information about her background on country club applications. She'd even paid to have her high school records sealed. She'd spent 20 years running from Madeline Fletcher, only to collide with her past in the form of her cousin Leon, the boy who'd grown up 3 trailers away and remembered exactly who she used to be. But Leon was facing his own reckoning. His phone was ringing constantly with calls from board members, investors, and charity leaders who wanted to know his next move. The public was watching to see how the billionaire CEO would handle his moment of ultimate power over someone who'd humiliated him. Some callers urged him to show mercy. Others demanded that he make an example of her. All of them were missing the point. This wasn't about justice or mercy anymore. This was about family. The family that had abandoned his mother when she needed them most. The family that had chosen social climbing over loyalty. The family that had forgotten where they came from. Leon made his decision. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 20 years. The landline at Sunset Gardens Mobile Home Park, where his Aunt Betty still lived in the same single-wide trailer where Madeline had grown up. "Aunt Betty? It's Leon. Rosa's boy." "Oh, honey." The elderly woman's voice was warm with recognition. "I've been watching the news. I can't believe, that girl who was so mean to you, that was our Maddie, wasn't it?" "Yes, it was. She was such a sweet child, Leon. I don't know what happened to her. She stopped visiting after she went to college. Stopped calling. When Rosa died, I sent her a letter about the funeral, but she never came." Leon closed his eyes. "I know, Aunt Betty. Are you going to hurt her, honey? I know she was terrible to you, but she's still family. And sometimes family needs saving from themselves." As Leon hung up the phone, he realized that Aunt Betty was right. Madeline didn't need to be destroyed. She needed to be reminded of who she really was. But that would require her to want to remember. And based on the last 20 years of evidence, that seemed like the most impossible task of all. The question was, did people really change, or did they just get better at hiding who they'd always been? Leon was about to find out. And so was Madeline, whether they wanted to or not. By morning, Madeline's carefully constructed world had crumbled into ash. She woke in her hotel room to find 17 missed calls from Richard and a text that made her blood freeze. "The partners met this morning. They've asked me to take a leave of absence until this blows over. We're ruined, Madeline. 20 years of building this business, and it's gone." The news got worse with each passing hour. The country club had revoked her membership. The Children's Hospital had not only removed her from the gala committee, but issued a public statement distancing themselves from her comments. The women's shelter where she'd volunteered for photo opportunities had declined her future services. But the cruelest blow came from an unexpected source. Her stepmother-in-law, Patricia Chase, Richard's mother, who'd never fully accepted Madeline but had maintained polite distance for her son's sake. "Madeline, dear." Patricia's voice dripped with false sweetness over the phone. "I felt I should inform you personally that the family is reconsidering Richard's inheritance situation. After yesterday's display, we feel it's best to protect the family's assets from any further embarrassment." The Chase family trust represented generational wealth, old money that had sustained Richard's lifestyle and provided the foundation for Madeline's social climbing. Without it, they were just another upper-middle-class couple with expensive tastes and mounting debts. "You can't be serious," Madeline whispered. "Oh, but I am, dear. You see, when you married into this family, you agreed to uphold certain standards. Yesterday's behavior fell rather dramatically short of those expectations. Meanwhile, Leon was facing his own moral crisis in the executive conference room of Brooks Enterprises, where his board of directors had gathered for an emergency meeting. The room was filled with the city's most powerful business leaders, all of whom had opinions about how he should handle the situation. "You have to sue her," declared Harrison Wells, the head of the city's largest law firm. "Defamation, harassment, creating a hostile work environment. Send a message that this behavior has consequences." "Absolutely not," countered Dr. Rebecca Martinez, who ran the city's largest nonprofit. "You destroy her now, and you become the villain. The billionaire who crushed a woman for one moment of poor judgment." Leon listened to the debate with growing unease. These people were talking about Madeline like she was a chess piece, not a human being. Not family. But family was exactly what made this so complicated. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, the security guard. "Sir, thought you should know, Mrs. Chase's husband just called. He's asking if there's any way to speak with you directly. Says it's urgent." Leon stared at the message, remembering Richard Chase from various charity events over the years. A decent man, if somewhat weak-willed, who'd always treated service staff with basic courtesy. Richard had never been part of the problem, which made what Leon was about to do even harder. "Ladies and gentlemen," Leon said, cutting through the board discussion. "I appreciate your input, but this is a personal matter now. I'll handle it as I see fit." After the board members filed out, Leon remained alone in the conference room, staring out at the city he'd helped build. Somewhere out there was his cousin, the girl who'd once helped his mother hang laundry, who'd shared Christmas dinners in their tiny trailer, who'd promised to stay in touch when she got her scholarship and moved away. The girl who'd forgotten that his mother had died alone in a hospital charity ward while Madeline was busy climbing her way into high society. Leon's assistant Jennifer knocked and entered with a tablet. "Sir, there's something else you need to see. It's about Mrs. Chase's background, something we missed in the first report." The tablet displayed financial records that painted a devastating picture. Richard's business wasn't just struggling because of the scandal. It had been in trouble for months. They'd remortgaged their house twice. Madeline had maxed out several credit cards funding her charity work and social appearances. The designer clothes, the expensive car, the country club membership. It was all leveraged against future income that might never materialize. "She's been living on borrowed money and borrowed time," Jennifer explained. "If Richard's business fails, they'll lose everything within 6 months." Leon felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd had as a child watching his mother work herself to exhaustion to keep their electricity from being shut off. Money problems were generational trauma in the Fletcher family, passed down like DNA. But Madeline had escaped that poverty, only to recreate it through her own choices. At the Grandview Hotel, Madeline was discovering just how quickly social currency could evaporate. Her phone calls weren't being returned. Her emails went unanswered. Even her hairdresser had suddenly become unavailable for her weekly appointment. The isolation was suffocating, but it was nothing compared to the growing realization that she'd destroyed innocent people in her wake. The gala she'd been planning for 8 months would still happen, but without the personal touch she'd spent her career perfecting. The funds raised would be lower. The impact on sick children would be real and measurable. She'd hurt people she'd never met, people who couldn't defend themselves, people who needed the very charity work she'd weaponized for her own social advancement. Her laptop chimed with an email from an address she didn't recognize. bettyf1952@email.com. "Maddie honey, it's your Aunt Betty from the park. I saw what happened on the news. I know you probably don't want to hear from me after all these years, but I wanted you to know that boy you were mean to. That's Leon. Rosa's Leon. Your cousin. I thought you should know that before things get worse. Love you, sweetheart. You're still family, no matter what. Call me." The laptop screen blurred as tears filled Madeline's eyes. Aunt Betty, who'd raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 16. Aunt Betty, who'd worked double shifts at the diner to help pay for Madeline's college applications. Aunt Betty, who'd never asked for anything in return except the occasional phone call. Aunt Betty, who Madeline hadn't spoken to in 7 years because she was embarrassed by the trailer park address. Leon. Rosa's Leon. The memory hit her like a physical blow, a serious-faced boy with intelligent eyes who'd always been reading something, who'd helped her with algebra homework at the kitchen table of his family's trailer. Rosa's son, who'd grown up to become one of the most powerful men in the state. The cousin she'd screamed at, insulted, and tried to have fired. The family member she'd completely forgotten existed. Madeline's phone rang. "Richard." "Madeline, We need to talk. My mother called. She's freezing our assets until this situation resolves. I can't access the trust fund, the business accounts, anything. We have maybe 2 weeks of living expenses in our personal checking account. Richard, there's more. Emily told me what she texted you yesterday. About Carmen. About wondering what you said to her. Richard's voice was heavy with exhaustion. Madeline, I've been thinking about our life together. Really thinking. And I'm starting to wonder if Emily was right. If this is who you really are when you think no one important is watching. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I love you, Richard continued. But I don't know if I like who you've become. And I don't know if you even remember who you used to be. After he hung up, Madeline sat in the hotel room's silence, surrounded by the wreckage of everything she'd built. Her marriage was crumbling. Her social standing had evaporated. Her financial security was gone. Her family, both the one she'd married into and the one she'd abandoned, had turned away from her. But the worst part wasn't the external destruction. The worst part was the growing certainty that everyone was right. This was who she really was. She'd spent 20 years running from Madeline Fletcher, only to discover that she'd become something far worse than a poor girl from a trailer park. She'd become someone who forgot that poor girls from trailer parks were human beings deserving of basic dignity. And now her cousin, her family, held her future in his hands. The same hands she'd tried to get fired for touching her car. Outside her hotel window, the city hummed with life. Somewhere out there, Leon Brooks was deciding her fate. Somewhere out there, people were working honest jobs for modest pay, trying to build decent lives without stepping on others. Somewhere out there was the girl she used to be, before she learned that the only way to feel valuable was to make other people feel worthless. The question was whether that girl still existed, buried beneath 20 years of careful construction and calculated cruelty, and whether it was too late to find her again. As the sun set over the city she'd called home for 2 decades, Madeline Chase realized she was about to lose everything. But maybe, for the first time in years, she was about to find herself. Whether she wanted to or not. Leon Brooks stood in the empty boardroom at 3 a.m., surrounded by legal documents that could destroy Madeline's life with a single signature. His lawyers had worked through the night to prepare a comprehensive lawsuit: defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, interference with business relations. The damages would be astronomical, the media coverage devastating, the message crystal clear. No one humiliates Leon Brooks without consequences. All he had to do was sign. His phone buzzed with a text from his head of security. Sir, Mrs. Chase is on the move. Left the hotel 20 minutes ago. Tracking her location now. Leon frowned. At 3 a.m., where could she possibly be going? The answer came 30 minutes later when his security team called. Sir, she's at Sunset Gardens Mobile Home Park. She's been sitting in her car outside Trailer 47 for the past 15 minutes. Trailer 47. Aunt Betty's trailer. The same single-wide where Madeline had grown up after her parents died. Leon made a decision that would have surprised his board of directors. Instead of signing the lawsuit papers, he grabbed his keys and drove across the city to the place he'd spent his childhood, a place he hadn't visited in over a decade. Meanwhile, Madeline sat in her Maserati in the gravel driveway of her past, staring at the trailer that looked exactly the same as it had 20 years ago. The aluminum siding was a little more faded, the wooden steps sagged a bit more, but it was unchanged, a monument to the life she'd fought so hard to escape. Aunt Betty's porch light came on, and the front door opened. A small, elderly woman in a worn bathrobe stepped out, squinting into the darkness. Maddie, honey, is that you? Madeline's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. She stumbled out of the car and into her aunt's arms, sobbing like the lost 16-year-old girl she'd once been. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry, Aunt Betty. I forgot everything. I forgot who I was, where I came from, what you taught me. Betty Fletcher held her niece tight, the way she had during those terrible months after the car accident, when Madeline had been raw with grief and terror about her future. Sure, baby girl. Come inside. We'll figure this out. The trailer's interior was a time capsule of Madeline's adolescence. The same floral couch where she'd done homework. The same small kitchen table where she'd filled out college applications. The same photographs on the walls, including one of a young Madeline with her cousin Leon at a family Christmas, both of them gap-toothed and grinning. You remember Leon, Betty said softly, noting where Madeline's gaze had landed. Rosa's boy. You two were thick as thieves before you went off to college. He was so smart, Madeline whispered. Always reading, always asking questions. I used to think he'd be a teacher or maybe a scientist. I never imagined that he'd become one of the richest men in the state. Yeah, that surprised all of us. Betty poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that had been brewing since before Madeline arrived. Some maternal instinct had told her to prepare for company. But money didn't change him the way it changed you, honey. The words hit like a slap, but they were true. I saw the video, Betty continued. Saw how you talked to him. How you looked at him. Like he was nothing. Like he was one of us, Madeline finished miserably. Like he was from here. From this place I've spent 20 years pretending doesn't exist. Outside, gravel crunched as another car pulled into the driveway. Through the thin trailer walls, they heard footsteps on the wooden steps, then a gentle knock. Betty, it's Leon. I saw Madeline's car. Aunt Betty looked at her niece, whose face had gone white with terror. You want me to send him away? Madeline's mind raced. She could hide in the back bedroom like a child, wait for Leon to leave, then run back to her hotel and her lawyers and her desperate attempts to salvage her reputation. She could continue the pattern that had defined her adult life, running from uncomfortable truths, avoiding difficult conversations, choosing the easy path over the right one. Or she could open the door and face the boy she'd grown up with, who'd become the man she'd destroyed herself trying to impress, who now held her future in his hands. The impossible choice crystallized. Continue being Madeline Chase, the woman who'd forgotten her humanity, or rediscover Madeline Fletcher, the girl who'd once known that everyone deserved dignity. Let him in, she whispered. The door opened, and Leon Brooks stepped into the trailer where he'd spent countless afternoons of his childhood. He looked strangely vulnerable here, his expensive suit at odds with the humble surroundings that had shaped them both. For a long moment, the cousins stared at each other across 20 years of divergent paths and accumulated damage. Hi, Maddie, Leon said quietly. Hi, Leon. Aunt Betty, sensing the weight of the moment, made coffee for Leon and then tactfully withdrew to her bedroom, leaving them alone with their shared history and uncertain future. I remember this place, Leon said, settling onto the familiar couch. I remember you teaching me to play gin rummy at that table. You always won. You let me win, Madeline corrected. You were too nice to beat a girl whose parents had just died. Maybe. Leon studied her face, seeing past the designer makeup and perfect hair to the frightened girl underneath. What happened to us, Maddie? We used to be family. The question broke something inside Madeline that had been cracking for days. I got scared, she admitted. When I got that scholarship, when I saw how the other kids lived, how much money their families had, I realized what I'd never have if I stayed Madeline Fletcher from Sunset Gardens. So I decided to become someone else. At what cost? Everything. Madeline's voice was barely audible. My family. My values. My soul, apparently. I became the kind of person who looks down on people like us. People like your mother was. The mention of his mother hit Leon like a physical blow. Rosa worked herself to death cleaning offices for people who treated her like furniture. People who looked right through her like she didn't matter. People like me, Madeline whispered. Yeah, people like you. They sat in silence, the weight of acknowledgement settling between them like dust after an explosion. I can destroy you, Leon said finally. Legally, financially, socially. I have the power to make sure you never recover from this. I know. The whole city is watching to see what I'll do. If I let this slide, they'll think I'm weak. If I crush you, they'll think I'm cruel. Madeline looked up at him, and for the first time in years, her expression was completely honest. What do you think you should do? Leon leaned back against the couch where they'd watched cartoons as children, where Rosa had helped Madeline with homework while Betty worked double shifts, where their family had been whole before ambition and shame tore it apart. I think, he said slowly, that my mother would want me to remember that family is family, even when they forget it themselves. Even when they hurt you. Even when they disappoint you. Madeline felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Your mother was a saint. I should have come to her funeral. I should have been there for you. Yeah, you should have. I can't undo any of it, can I? The way I treated you yesterday, the way I abandoned you all, the person I became. Leon studied his cousin's face, really looked at her for the first time since the parking garage confrontation. Beneath the polished exterior, he saw something he'd almost forgotten existed, genuine remorse. Not the calculated apology of someone trying to escape consequences, but the raw grief of someone who'd finally seen herself clearly and was horrified by the reflection. "No," he said gently. "You can't undo it. But maybe you can do something harder." "What's that?" "You can choose who you want to be going forward. Starting right now. Tonight. In this trailer where we both learned what family means." Madeline wiped her eyes, smearing mascara she'd applied 12 hours ago in a different life. "Even if it's too late. Even if I've lost everything." "Especially then," Leon said. "Because that's when the choice actually means something." From the back bedroom came the soft sound of Aunt Betty's television. She was giving them privacy while staying close enough to provide comfort if needed. Just like she had during all those difficult nights of Madeline's adolescence. "I need to make this right," Madeline said suddenly. "Not just with you, but with everyone. The people I hurt yesterday, the people I've been hurting for years without realizing it." "That's going to be harder than anything you've ever done," Leon warned. "Easier to just disappear, change your name again, start over somewhere else." "I'm tired of running." Madeline's voice grew stronger. "I'm tired of being afraid of where I came from. I'm tired of forgetting that she gestured around the trailer, "these are the people who made me who I am. The good parts, anyway." Leon felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of anger he'd carried since childhood. "So what are you going to do?" Madeline stood up, decision crystallizing. "I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. And then I'm going to try to earn back what I lost, starting with the most important thing." "Which is?" She looked at her cousin, the boy who'd shared her Christmas dinners, who'd grown up to honor their family's values while she'd abandoned them, who had every right to destroy her but was offering her a chance at redemption instead. "My family," she said. Outside, dawn was beginning to break over Sunset Gardens mobile home park, painting the modest trailers in shades of gold and pink. It was the same sunrise that had greeted them as children, the same light that had illuminated their dreams and fears and hopes for the future. The same light that was now illuminating their impossible choice between justice and mercy, between revenge and forgiveness, between the people they'd become and the people they could still choose to be. In a few hours, the world would be watching to see what Leon Brooks decided to do with his power. But first, two cousins had to decide what they owed each other, and what they owed the memory of the family that had raised them to know right from wrong. Even when knowing right from wrong was the hardest thing of all. 3 weeks later, the grand ballroom of the Millennium Hotel buzzed with nervous energy as the city's elite gathered for what many assumed would be a disaster. The Children's Hospital Foundation Gala, the event Madeline had poured her heart into before destroying her reputation, was proceeding as scheduled, but without its original chair and with Brooks Enterprises' sponsorship hanging in limbo. Leon stood at the back of the ballroom, watching wealthy donors awkwardly navigate conversations about the woman who'd become the city's most infamous socialite. He'd maintained complete silence about his intentions for 3 weeks, letting speculation build while he and Madeline worked on something the public would never expect. Near the stage, Dr. Patricia Williams, the hospital's chief of pediatric oncology, checked her notes one final time. She'd agreed to speak tonight despite the organizational chaos, knowing that regardless of the drama, children still needed medical care. What the audience didn't know was that 2 hours earlier, a mysterious donor had quietly covered the remaining funding gap left by other sponsors who'd withdrawn. The hospital would get its new treatment wing regardless of tonight's success or failure. The lights dimmed, and Dr. Williams took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our annual gala. This year's event has faced unusual challenges. But before we begin, I'd like to share a story about 2 donors who reminded me why we do this work." The audience settled into polite attention, expecting the standard feel-good opening. 6 months ago, a woman contacted our volunteer coordinator. She wanted to visit our cancer ward, not for a photo opportunity or publicity, but to read stories to children during their chemotherapy sessions. She came every Tuesday for 26 weeks, bringing books and snacks and patience for scared kids who couldn't sleep. Leon's breath caught. He'd had no idea. She never gave her name to the media. Never posed for pictures. When children asked what she did for work, she'd say she was between jobs and change the subject to their favorite video games or movies. On the screen behind Dr. Williams, photos appeared, candid shots of Madeline in a simple sweater and jeans, sitting beside hospital beds, reading Charlotte's Web to a bald 8-year-old, helping a teenager with homework, holding a toddler while his mother stepped out for coffee. The audience murmured in confusion. This wasn't the woman from the viral video. That volunteer was Madeline Chase, Dr. Williams continued. And 3 weeks ago, when her scandal broke and she was removed from the gala committee, she didn't disappear. She doubled her volunteer hours. She's been here every day since, working in our kitchen, organizing supply closets, and continuing to read to children who don't care about her mistakes. They just know she shows up. Leon felt something shift in his chest. All those planning meetings, all those charity committee obligations Madeline had mentioned, he'd assumed they were social performances. But the pictures told a different story. This was genuine service, hidden from public view. Dr. Williams continued. But here's what Mrs. Chase doesn't know. One of our young patients, 7-year-old Marcus Thompson, has been recording videos on his mother's phone. Marcus has leukemia, and Mrs. Chase has been reading to him twice a week for months. The screen lit up with a shaky phone video of a small boy in a hospital bed, his face bright with excitement. "Hi, Miss Maddie." Marcus's voice rang through the ballroom speakers. "I saw people being mean to you on the internet. But I wanted to tell everyone that you're the nicest lady in the whole world. You always remember my favorite cookies, and you do funny voices when you read stories, and you never look scared of my bald head like some grown-ups do." The audience was riveting silent now. "My mom says you're in trouble because you were mean to someone. But I think maybe you were just having a bad day. Everyone has bad days. Even me, and I have cancer." Marcus giggled. "I made you a picture. It's you and me reading together. I hope you like it." The video ended, and Dr. Williams held up a crayon drawing of a woman and child sitting together with an enormous book between them. Hearts floated around their heads. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Williams said, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't know what happened in that parking garage 3 weeks ago. But I know what happens in our cancer ward every Tuesday and Thursday. I know which version of Madeline Chase our children see." The ballroom erupted in whispered conversations. This wasn't the narrative anyone had expected. Leon felt his phone buzz with a text. "Sir, Mrs. Chase just arrived. She's in the service corridor with a cart of children's books. Says she promised Marcus she'd be here tonight to help serve dinner to the volunteers." Even now, even at the event she'd been banned from attending as a guest, Madeline was here to serve others. Leon made his way through the crowd toward the service entrance, passing bewildered donors who were struggling to reconcile the woman in the videos with the monster they'd imagined. Behind him, Dr. Williams was introducing the evening's keynote speaker, a surprise addition to the program. He found Madeline in a narrow hallway lined with catering supplies, wearing a simple black dress and an apron, carefully arranging picture books on a cart. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and for a moment, neither spoke. "I didn't know about the volunteer work," Leon said quietly. "The real volunteer work. Not the committee meetings, the actual time with the kids." Madeline's cheeks flushed. It wasn't supposed to be public. That was never the point. Then what was the point? She was quiet for a long moment, arranging and rearranging the same 3 books. "Do you remember when your mother got sick? Those last few months before she died?" Leon nodded, the memory still painful after 15 years. "I wanted to visit her in the hospital. I drove there twice, but I never went in. I was afraid she'd ask why I'd stopped calling, why I'd missed family gatherings, why I'd forgotten about you all. I was afraid she'd see what I'd become." Leon's throat tightened. "After she died, I started volunteering here. At first, it was guilt. But then I met Marcus and Sophia and little Jamie with the brain tumor, and I realized this was how I could honor Rosa's memory. By showing up for other people's children the way I failed to show up for her son." The service corridor fell silent except for the distant sound of dinner being served in the ballroom. "Madeline," Leon said carefully, "there's something I need to tell you about that day in the parking garage." She looked up, and he saw genuine fear in her eyes. "I wasn't there by accident. I've been doing those undercover visits for over a year, trying to understand how our workers are treated. But that day, that specific day and location, it wasn't random." Madeline's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I knew you'd be there. I'd been tracking your schedule for weeks." "Why?" Leon's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I'd been trying to work up the courage to approach you for months. After I saw you at last year's hospital benefit, I realized you were family, but I didn't know how to bridge the gap. I thought if I could see who you really were when you didn't know it was me." The truth hit Madeline like a physical blow. "You were testing me." "No," Leon said quickly. "I was testing myself. Testing whether I could forgive you for abandoning us. Testing whether family meant anything after all these years. And I failed spectacularly." "You failed the test," Leon agreed. "But you passed something more important. You showed me that people can change. That the girl who helped my mother with laundry was still in there somewhere, buried under 20 years of fear and shame. From the ballroom came the sound of applause. The keynote speaker had apparently finished. There's something else, Leon continued. The charity work you thought you'd lost? The gala funding? The hospital wing? It's all happening. Every dollar that was pledged is still coming through. Madeline stared at him. How? Because 3 hours ago, I made an announcement. Brooks Enterprises isn't just maintaining our original pledge, we're doubling it. And I'm starting a new foundation in my mother's name, the Rosa Fletcher Brooks Foundation for Working Families. Leon, you don't have to. I'm not doing it for you, he said gently. I'm doing it for Marcus and Sophia, and every child who needs help. But I am doing it with you, if you want. The foundation needs someone who understands both sides. Someone who remembers what it's like to need help and what it's like to have the power to give it. Madeline's eyes filled with tears. You'd trust me with that? After everything? I'd trust Madeline Fletcher with that, Leon said. The girl who taught me gin rummy and helped Aunt Rosa with laundry and knew that everyone deserves dignity. That's who I'm offering this job to. From inside the ballroom came another round of applause, followed by Dr. Williams' voice. And now, I'd like to invite someone special to say a few words. Someone who's learned that redemption isn't about the mistakes we make, but about how we choose to make them right. Leon and Madeline looked at each other in confusion. Did you plan this? Madeline asked. No, Leon said, equally bewildered. Dr. Williams continued. Please welcome Marcus Thompson and his mother, Angela. Through the service corridor speakers, they heard a small boy's voice, stronger now than in the recorded video. Hi, everyone. Miss Maddie, I know you're out there somewhere. Mom and me watch the news, and we know you're sad about the mean things people are saying. But all us kids in the cancer ward took a vote, and we want you to know something. Leon and Madeline moved closer to the speakers, straining to hear. We don't care if you had a bad day. We don't care if you made a mistake. We care that you read us stories and remember our names and bring us the good cookies from the cafeteria. We care that you cry with our moms when we're sick and celebrate with us when we get better. Marcus's mother Angela took the microphone. Mrs. Chase, wherever you are, these children want you to know that they see your heart. They see who you really are when cameras aren't rolling and social media isn't watching. They see the woman who shows up. The ballroom fell completely silent. So we're announcing tonight, Angela continued, that the children of Ward 7 have voted to dedicate their new playroom to Miss Maddie, the lady who taught them that even on your worst days, you can still choose to be kind. The sound of sustained applause thundered through the speakers. Leon looked at his cousin, the girl who'd lost everything and found herself, the woman who'd learned to value service over status, the family member who'd come home in the hardest possible way. Sounds like you have some fans, he said softly. Sounds like we both learned something about what really matters, Madeline replied. From the ballroom, Dr. Williams called out, Mrs. Chase, if you're here tonight, these children would very much like to see you. Leon held out his arm. Shall we go face the music together? Like family. Madeline looked down at her simple dress and service apron, then at her cousin who'd chosen forgiveness over revenge, mercy over justice, love over power. For the first time in 20 years, she felt like herself. Let's go, she said, taking his arm. Let's go home. And together, the cousins who'd found their way back to each other walked into the ballroom to face their future, not as the people they'd pretended to be, but as the family they'd always been underneath. The crowd rose to their feet as they appeared, applauding not for the billionaire CEO or the reformed socialite, but for the living proof that people can change, families can heal, and sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is simply showing up for each other. In the front row, a small boy with bright eyes and a bald head held up a crayon drawing, beaming as his favorite story reader finally came home. 1 year later, Leon Brooks stood in the same parking garage where everything had changed, watching a very different scene unfold. The space had been transformed into a community service center for the grand opening of the Rosa Fletcher Brooks Foundation, and the concrete walls that had once echoed with angry voices now rang with children's laughter. Madeline, she'd legally changed her name back to Madeline Fletcher Brooks, honoring both her roots and her new purpose, knelt beside a group of kids from the hospital's outpatient program, helping them paint a mural on what had once been a stark gray wall. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and a foundation t-shirt splattered with rainbow-colored handprints. Miss Maddie, called out Marcus Thompson, now 8 years old and 2 months into remission. Can you help me reach the high part? Of course, sweetie. Madeline lifted him up so he could add his contribution to the mural, a bright yellow sun that seemed to illuminate everything around it. Leon smiled, remembering how his mother used to lift him the same way to reach the cookies on the top shelf of their tiny trailer kitchen. Some gestures transcended generations. The service center represented everything they'd built together over the past year. Where other foundations wrote checks from boardrooms, the Rosa Fletcher Brooks Foundation required its board members to work directly with the families they served. Leon spent one day a week here, not as a CEO making appearances, but as a volunteer who knew how to operate the industrial dishwasher and wasn't afraid to unclog toilets when necessary. The transformation hadn't been easy for either of them. Madeline's marriage to Richard had initially crumbled under the weight of financial stress and social ostracism. But something unexpected had happened when they lost the country club. Memberships and trust fund access, they'd rediscovered each other. Richard, freed from the pressure to maintain his family's expectations, had revealed a man Madeline barely knew. Someone who'd always wanted to do meaningful work but had been trapped by generational wealth and social obligations. Now Richard ran the foundation's financial literacy program, teaching working families how to build savings and avoid the debt traps that had nearly destroyed their own lives. His mother Patricia had eventually cut them off entirely, but Richard had discovered that losing his inheritance meant gaining his integrity. "Dad's bringing the kids from the literacy program," Emily Chase said, approaching Leon with a tablet showing the day's volunteer schedule. Richard's daughter had surprised everyone by becoming the foundation's most dedicated volunteer, working there every summer and winter break from college. "Your stepmom's probably wondering where you are," Leon observed, noting how Emily's relationship with Madeline had evolved from cold tolerance to genuine affection. "She's not my stepmom anymore," Emily said with a grin. "She's family. Real family. The kind that shows up when things get hard." Leon understood the distinction. Real family didn't abandon each other when times got tough. Real family didn't forget where they came from or who had helped them along the way. Victoria Reeves approached, her security guard uniform replaced by a crisp business suit. Leon had hired her as the foundation's program director after she'd finished law school, recognizing that her ability to see the humanity in everyone made her perfect for the role. "We've got representatives from 3 other cities here today," Victoria reported. "They want to know if we'd consider expanding the model." "What do you think?" Leon asked. "I think your mother would have loved knowing that her story helped create something bigger than any of us imagined." The opening ceremony began with Dr. Williams introducing the foundation's impact over its first year. 2,400 families served, 150 children provided with educational support, 89 adults trained for better jobs, and countless moments of dignity restored to people who'd been invisible to the broader community. But the most powerful moment came when Aunt Betty took the stage, wearing the same simple dress she'd worn to Leon's mother's funeral 15 years ago. "I've been thinking about my sister Rosa a lot today," Betty said, her voice carrying clearly through the transformed garage. "She used to say that kindness wasn't something you did when it was convenient, it was something you chose when it was hard." She looked directly at Leon and Madeline, standing together in the crowd. "These 2 children of mine forgot that lesson for a while. They got lost in different ways, one in anger, one in shame. But they found their way back to each other, and more importantly, they found their way back to Rosa's teaching." Betty's eyes twinkled with the same mischief that had gotten them through countless difficult nights in the trailer park. "And I think Rosa would be particularly amused that it took a parking garage confrontation and 12 million YouTube views for her son and niece to remember they were family." The crowd laughed, and Leon felt the last of his anger about that day dissolve into something warmer, gratitude. Without that terrible moment of public humiliation, none of this would have existed. As the ceremony concluded and volunteers began serving lunch to the community members who'd gathered for the opening, Leon found himself standing in the exact spot where Madeline had screamed at him a year ago. The contrast was overwhelming. "Funny how things come full circle," Madeline said, joining him at the spot where their story had begun. "Are you happy?" Leon asked. "Really happy? Because I know what you gave up to get here." Madeline looked around at the bustling community center, children playing, families learning, volunteers serving with genuine joy rather than social obligation. Marcus was teaching a younger boy how to paint, while his mother Angela chatted with other parents who no longer felt alone in their struggles. "I gave up a life that wasn't really mine," she said. "I got back a life that actually matters. Even though you'll never have the country club back, the designer clothes, the social status." Madeline smiled, and Leon saw something in her expression that had been missing for 20 years. Peace. "Leon," I spent 2 decades trying to prove I was better than where I came from. Turns out the most powerful thing I could do was remember that where I come from is exactly why I'm supposed to help others. A small commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A news crew was setting up, and Leon tensed, remembering how media attention had nearly destroyed both their lives. But this time was different. The reporter, a young woman with kind eyes, approached them respectfully. "Mr. Brooks, Mrs. Fletcher Brooks, I'm Janet Kim from Channel 7. We're doing a follow-up story on the parking garage incident. How it led to this foundation, how it changed both your lives. What's your angle?" Leon asked cautiously. That sometimes our worst moments can become our greatest opportunities to grow. That shame can transform into service, and pain can become purpose. Janet looked around the bustling center. "This place exists because of your confrontation. These families are being helped because you both chose to learn from your mistakes rather than just survive them." The interview was brief but powerful. Leon spoke about learning to channel his anger into systemic change. Madeline talked about discovering that true worth came from service, not status. Together, they demonstrated that family could be rebuilt, trust could be restored, and even the most public failures could become the foundation for private redemption. As the news crew packed up, Madeline's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus's mother. "Miss Maddie, Marcus wants to know if you can read to the kids tonight. The new patient in bed 12 is scared and won't talk to anyone. Marcus thinks you might be able to help." "Duty calls?" Leon asked, reading over her shoulder. "The best kind of duty," Madeline replied. They walked toward the exit together, passing the mural the children had painted. In bright colors, it told the story of a community coming together, of people helping each other, of second chances and new beginnings. At the center of the mural, barely visible unless you knew to look for it, was a small painting of 2 children sitting at a kitchen table, sharing a book. The boy and girl in the picture looked remarkably like Leon and Madeline had 30 years ago, before life had pulled them in different directions. "Think we'll keep this going?" Leon asked as they reached their cars, his a modest sedan, hers a practical minivan that could transport art supplies and hospital volunteers. "I think we don't have a choice," Madeline said. "Not if we want to keep honoring the people who made us who we really are." As they drove away from the foundation, Leon to a board meeting where he'd advocate for worker dignity policies, Madeline to the hospital where scared children needed someone to show up, neither of them looked back at the parking garage that had changed everything. They didn't need to. They were too busy looking forward, toward a future built on the values their family had taught them, toward work that mattered more than wealth, toward a legacy that would outlast any viral video or social media storm. Behind them, the mural caught the late afternoon sunlight, its message clear to anyone willing to read it. Everyone deserves dignity. Family never gives up on family. And sometimes the most powerful transformation happens not when we get what we want, but when we remember what we're really supposed to be doing with our lives. In the end, the parking garage incident had given them something more valuable than money or status or social media fame. It had given them back themselves. And in a world that often seemed to reward the wrong things, that was the most revolutionary act of all. What did this story teach you about the power of humility and the importance of remembering where we come from? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.